Welcome everyone to the webinar. Glad to see such a great turnout. I hope you all already know me at this point. My name is Jeff Hall. I am the Office of Strategy, Science, and Technology Program Coordinator. My position here at the New Mexico Economic Development Department is to really help facilitate these grants, which some of you may know we just finished our fiscal year 24 Science and Technology Startup Grant. And now we are here today to discuss the SBIR STTR Matching Grant. This meeting is recorded, so if you're not comfortable with that, please let me know. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started. We will definitely allow time here at the end of the presentation for any questions. So as I get things set up, I'll be slowly letting more people in. But we'll get started here in just a second. Right. Just trying to click this. Okay. Hope you all can see my screen here. Try to throw this into presentation mode while I let in a few of these other people. So yeah, thank you all for joining. We will go ahead and get started. And I hope you all can see my screen. But again, thank you all for joining the webinar today. We're going to be talking about the SBIR STTR Matching Grant. The goal or the purpose of the grant is to assist the early stage technology companies with commercializing their technologies to continue to do business in New Mexico. The use of the funds are intended for expenses related to business development and commercialization. So to reiterate a point here is the funds cannot be utilized for research and development purposes. And we'll get into that here in a second. So we have focus areas as follows. We have the aerospace, biosciences, cybersecurity, intelligent manufacturing, sustainable and green energy. Now, there are a few different requirements for eligibility. You have to be a company that's headquartered in New Mexico. You have to be a for-profit science or technology company. And you also have to be in good standing with the state. Again, there are a few areas that you have to have your business focus in, including aerospace, biosciences, cybersecurity, intelligent manufacturing, and sustainable and green energy. Now, if your company provides services to these areas, that does not I guess, count. You have to be in these various areas, or your organization has to fit within these NAICS. So, the last requirement for the SBIR STTR matching is you must have an active federal SBIR STTR phase 1 or phase 2 at the time of application. So I've had questions where people have asked if they're applying for one, would that qualify? It does not. Or if you just finished one, that does not count. It has to be active and current. And you have to certify that at least 51% of the activities conducted under the federal funding and 31% of the state funds will be performed within New Mexico. The award varies depending on what type of SBIR STTR you are in. You could either have up to $25,000 for a phase 1 or up to $100,000 for a phase 2. And there were 5 awardees in fiscal year 22. To reiterate the point for eligible and ineligible funding uses, eligible funding use includes an intellectual property assessment, patent filing, outside lab testing and validation. So really anything that would require you to pay anyone in-house would be considered a payroll expense. However, a contracting fee is not considered a payroll expense and an allowable expense. They also allow regulatory assessments and certifications, meeting with customers, partners, and investors, and attending trade shows. However, no more than 10% of the total awarded funds can be utilized towards this. So for a $25,000 grant, that would mean that your budget request should not exceed $2,500 for to meet that 10%. Similarly, for the $100,000 match award, the budget request should not exceed that $10,000. And we also allow for marketing research and data acquisition. Again, no payroll is allowed. And I think this is something that people are sometimes confused about. Payroll includes anybody that works for your organization as an employee, cannot be reimbursed through this grant. We have other state grants that allow for that type of reimbursement. We cannot pay for any research and development, and so making sure that in the application you stay away from saying that you want to use the funds to create or develop or design. And again, the funds cannot be used for materials or supplies over $100. So making sure that we're staying on top of that. And then of course, no alcohol, food, drugs, etc. And the grant also cannot be used for laboratory or business equipment, which I guess kind of is materials or supplies. Here are some important dates to keep in mind. October 16th, which is this coming Monday at 8 a.m., the online application opens. And you have until November 13th by 5 p.m. to submit your application in order to be considered. The turnout for our science and technology grant was such that we had overwhelming amount of applicants, and yet I still had, I would say, a significant number of people reaching out and inquiring if they could submit their application after the due date, which we did not allow. And I believe that it's probably a good idea not to submit for a competitive grant after the due date, because it definitely affects how people are looking at your application in comparison for other applications. So, oh, and hold up. I think we have some more people who joined us, so I'm going to try to let them all in. So yeah, apologize for the break. Hopefully those of you who joined late um, will be able to see the recording for any of the parts that you may have missed, but welcome. And just to reiterate, for those of you who just joined, here is a list of eligible funding uses and ineligible funding uses. All of this information can be found on the grant manual on our website. So whenever you go to the edd.newmexico.gov website and you go under business resources, selecting the Office of Strategy, Science, and Technology should give you a directory of the various grant programs that we manage in our office. And if you select the SBIR STTR matching grant page, it should have a link to our grant manual where you can find all of this information. If you have any questions about it, though, feel free to reach out to me. The sooner that you're able to submit your grant, I will try to review it as soon as possible in order to point out anything that is glaring that we may need for you to correct. And I apologize. I am trying to text message some people who are having some challenges. So give me 1 second. Okay. So again, my advice is to submit sooner rather than later. If you wait until November 13th at 5 p.m., it's too late at that point for me to be able to assist with that application. So at that point, eligible applications are then reviewed by our Technology Research Collaborative Board. We may or may not ask various applicants to provide a brief presentation and interview with the TRC, at which point final selections will be made and approved by the secretary or the cabinet secretary or the deputy cabinet secretary in this instance, and then we'll let the awardees know by December of 2023. Now, all of these projects must be completed by June 30th, 2024, and there'll be some further actions required from companies at that point. Now, speaking towards the application, the evaluation is based off of the following criteria. The proposals, so what is your problem statement? What is the unique value proposition? The Science and Technology Starter Grant was very competitive. And so there were some nuanced grading elements that were taken into account whenever we had to make our final selection. And so really being able to address the problem statement, what type of unique value you bring in a competitive market, and really addressing what that competition looks like how you're different, how you're better, is key. Not only that, showcasing where the technology is at as far as in its development and really the point where it's at for commercialization efforts. Um, we uh, are trying to, and I've probably spoken to a few of you about this already, but the state is really trying to showcase how the money that they're putting towards these efforts create a lasting impact. And so really looking at what the follow-on investment and future job creation looks like, as well as obviously the proposed use of funds. And then making sure that you highlight the capacity of your team and the expertise that you bring to the industry. Now, if you are selected for an award, no, hopefully everyone is, but for those who are, the grant is awarded on a cost reimbursement or payment. And in order to receive those payments, a company must submit a New Mexico W-9. And in that, there will be a requirement for a final report, follow-on funding updates. So by June 30th, 2024, we'll need a final report. We'll also ask for reporting to happen throughout that grant award phase. But after June 30th of 2024, you will be asked, have you had any new jobs? Are you hiring any new jobs? Or have you had any follow-on funding since the state made that investment? Also, and I think that this is important to know, is awardees must agree to use the EDD logo on their website and marketing materials for any funds that are used to attend conferences or build websites or presentations. And they must also provide a link to the EDD website on their company website. Here is the Office of Strategy, Science, and Technology. Again, I myself, Jeff Holland, the program coordinator, happy to answer any of your questions. Nora Meyer-Sackett is our director, and unfortunately she couldn't make it on the call today. But also Sarah Gutierrez, our deputy director, in addition to Nora, are more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. And with that, I'll hop out. Here's my contact information for you guys who need it. But I'll hop out of presentation mode and open the floor up to any questions. If you could please either raise your hand or put it in the chat, and I'd be more than happy to address any of your questions. So John Rao said, would direct air capture of CO2 be considered green energy? So I think that it could be considered green energy. My thought process on that being that a lot of green energy is facilitated by direct air carbon capture. So I think it's a necessary component for the green energy economy, and I would consider it a part of that. I hope that answers your question. Sue, is there a ceiling for the amount to apply for? So yes, earlier in the presentation, I did say the award amounts for phase 1 would be up to $25,000. for SBIR STTR Phase 1 match, and then up to $100,000 for a Phase 2 match. So I hope that helps you understand that. And again, all of that information can be found on the website, and it's part of the grant manual. No problems. Okay. So Trey says, do we need a cost estimate from a legal firm for a patent filing expense? No. I've seen applications that keep it very broad, but in order to get the reimbursement, we will need to see that. For instance, if you say in your budget application, I'm going to utilize $20,000 for the patent filing fee, and you spend 17,500 on it, then, that is what it is. I have heard that there are some instances where we can go maybe out a little outside of that budget request, but it's very limited and it's on a case by case basis. So I would say it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have an estimate. And the more specific you are with your budget request, I think the more favorably it is reviewed to show that you're going to be a good steward of the state funds. So I have another question. Can a company submit 2 applications if it has received 2 federal SBIR grants? Excellent question. I would think no. The reason why is these awards are given per company, not per SBIR. So I believe we're trying to fulfill a niche within the funding that isn't covered by the SBIR STTR, but we're very limited with how much funding we do have to award. So I don't think that there's anything explicitly said in the grant manual. I'll have to take another look just to be sure. But I would imagine that it is not allowable. But I can follow up with you, Priska, on that. Give me more of a certain answer. Noel, I see that the funds can't be used for R&D, but that they can be used for outside lab testing and validation. Does the outside lab testing need to be for non-R&D activities? Yes. And I know that, when you think of the word research, it could be a very broad statement. My understanding is the outside lab testing is for validation and verification. So if you needed to meet some type of, let's say, FDA regulation, and you needed to have a specific sourced test in order to meet whatever stipulation set out by that overseeing authority, that could be considered an allowable expense. Or if you have a validation testing that can only be completed by a lab that's located in Massachusetts, then that's something else that can be considered allowable. But yeah, if you are having somebody in an outside lab help create a new delivery system, for instance, just throwing that out there, that of course would be considered development, and at that point I don't believe would be an allowable expense. So I hope that answers your question. If not, Noel, I'm more than happy to talk to you outside of this meeting. So let's see. So to be clear, conferences are considered different than trade shows. So yes and no. I think that my understanding is that conferences, in the sense of that 10% limit, um, travel reimbursement and costs associated with conferences can be in their own category, but I've also seen it in the past where they're kind of listed in conjunction with another category. Um, and so, really what this fund is trying to do is assist with the commercialization of the product. So if the conference in question is something that you're going to in order to promote and market your product, that I think is more considered a trade show. But if you're going to a conference to network and see what other opportunities are out there, it's considered conference. And so if you have any questions about that, like there's a specific scenario or a specific conference that you're wanting to go to and a trade show that you're wanting to go to, and you feel like it exceeds that funding limit, more than happy to discuss that with you one-on-one, just to see if your particular situation is something that we could um, utilize the funds for. I hope that was clear, Trace. So, Mark, our beachhead market is national security, but we have additional markets in cancer treatment and space mining or mining for rare earths, a green issue. Do you think this would work if the focus is on those topics rather than the beachhead? I would say yes, Mark. Um, Space is definitely huge. The green economy is one of our key sectors. So if you're going to show that the technology will have applications there, and that's the industry that you're also seeing, and your main customer is probably the defense, the DoD, then I would definitely highlight your applications in the primary focus sectors in your presentation and in your application, because that is what those 5 areas that I mentioned are what the funds are designated for. I hope that's helpful. John, if awarded from the NSF in a first quarter, it looks as if the November timing would overlap into phase 2. Is this how it works, or do we propose to NMEDD at the time we upload to the agency? So it's at the time of application. So if your phase 2 award will start prior to that November 13th deadline, and you have an award in hand, then I would definitely be applying for the phase 2. Um, Otherwise, apply to the phase 1. And I know that these grants can go on for years. So something else that I've talked about with other companies is that perhaps you wait a year to apply till you have that phase 2 a little bit more in hand, if that makes sense. So if you're not sure whether or not you're going to have it by the application deadline, the grant funding announcement will become available again next year. Um, and I would say wait, because it makes your application a lot stronger. I feel like if you're coming in and you can kind of show that what the stipulations for the grant are. And John, we can speak more later. Um, Webinar attendance was listed as required for the application. Are you keeping a list of webinar attendees and their company? So yes, we are recording this session right now. So everybody that is listed here, we will make note that you have attended this webinar. And appreciate you all. Yes, thank you. And you can only apply once every other year or every 2 years, sorry. Um, and that is something that I am open to feedback on. Um, so if you guys have any type of feedback as far as what this assistance could look like for you through multiple years, I'm more than happy to talk to you offline about that and see what can be done. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns, veiled threats? I don't. I'm assuming not. So thank you all so much for joining this webinar. One more question. Okay, so if we got a phase 1, 25K, we cannot apply for a phase 2 for another year. So correct. If you were awarded grant funds this year, let's say you apply, you're awarded, you had a phase 1, and you get that award letter, and your phase 1 ends in the next calendar year, and you were then awarded another or a phase 2 the next year, you would not be eligible to apply for the phase 2 that following year. But again, I am open to that feedback in consideration that a once every 3-year funding might not feel as impactful as various uh, multi-year efforts would. So if that's something that interests you, I'm definitely open to hearing more and discussing more about that with you in order to see what can be done. So yes, if there's no other questions, of course, and if there's no other questions, thank you all for attending. And again, my contact information is on the website. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. If I don't answer right away, I'll definitely answer as soon as I can. However, have a great rest of your day, a good weekend, and we'll be talking to you all soon. Thanks, you guys. Hello. In the previous video, you heard me say that the grant for the SBIR STTR was only allowed once every 2 years. That is not accurate. The grant application is open per company per year per SBIR STTR that they have that is active and complete. So what I mean by that is company A can apply if they have a phase 1 that ends in a given fiscal year. So say you have a SBIR STTR that ends in May and you're awarded a phase 2 SBIR STTR, then you will be able to apply again next year for that subsequent SBIR STTR. And similarly, for companies who have multiple SBIRs, they would be able to apply year after year utilizing separate SBIRs. Please refer to the grant manual, as I said, for more detail, or reach out to me anytime. Thank you.